In 1999, the public was outraged to learn that Congressman Tony Schnell had introduced Bill 602P to allow the United States Postal Service to impose a 5-cent tax on every single email that was sent. Email action alerts were sent out with alarming instructions to read this if you intend to stay online and continue using email. Congressional offices were flooded by frustrated constituents. The issue even got raised to campaign debates where candidates predictably came out in opposition to this misguided scheme. There was just one problem. None of it was real. There was no Bill 602P. There wasn't even a Congressman Schnell in the House of Representatives. The whole thing was an internet hoax, and everyone should have just moved on. But the Republicans forged ahead. They introduced the Internet Access Charge Prohibition Act of 1999, apparently because only by passing actual legislation to prohibit the goals of the imaginary legislation authored by a fictitious congressman could we prevent these horrible surcharges from being imposed in the real world. But it didn't just do that piece of legislation. Then it went on further to actually include provisions which would have hurt poor and rural Americans to get phone service. So I'm reminded of that legislation as we consider this bill to prevent the regulation of farm dust. Just like the email tax hoax, there is no plan to regulate farm dust any more than there is to regulate fairy dust. There is no attempt to accomplish that goal. Let me say that again. EPA has made it very clear that the so-called plan to regulate farm dust is a myth. But that hasn't stopped the Republicans from moving forward with this legislation. And just like the email tax bill, this bill goes well beyond its stated intent because it also blocks EPA from setting standards for the dirty soot that gets spewed out of coal-fired power plants, incinerators, refineries, and chemical plants. That's the real agenda, not to stop something that isn't going to happen, but to then switch in the middle of their legislation to move over to something that really would protect the public from public health hazards. This bill should be relegated to the dustbin of similar urban legends, along with Congressman Schnell's imaginary email tax bill. Ms. McCarthy, can you tell me whether EPA has any new plan to specifically regulate farm dust?
We do not.
You do not?
We do not.
Isn't it true that this legislation goes beyond a simple prohibition on farm dust regulations by also preventing EPA from regulating any dust that is generated by activities that are typically conducted in rural areas and any dust that can be blown in the wind?
That's true, Congressman.
Even if that dust is actually coming from coal-fired power plants or other industrial sources?
There is a grave concern that that is part of what the bill might do.
And finally, since I am sure that many little girls all over America care about this deeply, can you commit to me that EPA will never try to regulate fairy dust or pixie dust? Because if not, we may just want to amend the legislation in order to protect us against that threat, which could be posed by the EPA or other regulatory agencies seeking to move into other fictional areas, such as the legislation which is being considered here by this committee.
After we look at the complete scientific review, yes.
You will make sure that you do not, under any circumstance. Okay, thank you. So I thank the chair very much and I yield back the balance of my time.